I'll create an engaging and realistic story based on the D.B. Cooper case, structured in 4 interconnected chapters of approximately 1,100 words each. The narrative will be in English, set in the USA, and titled, When Reality Beats Fiction, Insane Crime Stories. This will be written as a continuous text without subtopics, focusing on authentic human drama without supernatural elements. When Reality Beats Fiction, Insane Crime Stories. Chapter 1. The night before Thanksgiving 1971 hung heavy with anticipation over Portland International Airport. Rain pattered against the terminal windows as passengers hurried to catch their flights home for the holiday. Among them walked a nondescript man in his mid-40s, dressed in a crisp dark suit and black tie. He carried a briefcase and wore dark sunglasses despite the overcast weather. The airline ticket in his pocket read, Dan Cooper. Flight attendant Florence Schaffner barely noticed him boarding Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 to Seattle. He was just another businessman among many, taking the short 30-minute hop between cities. As the Boeing 727 climbed into the cloud-covered sky at 2:50 p.m., Cooper settled into seat 18C in the rear of the aircraft, ordered a bourbon and soda, and lit a cigarette. "Excuse me, miss," he said quietly as Florence passed by his seat. His voice was calm, almost gentle. He handed her a note which she tucked into her pocket, assuming it contained a businessman's phone number, a common occurrence for flight attendants in 1971. "You might want to read that," Cooper suggested, his eyes never leaving hers. "I have a bomb." Florence unfolded the note and read words that would launch the most baffling criminal investigation in American history. "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." When Florence sat down, Cooper opened his briefcase just enough to reveal what appeared to be red cylinders attached to wires. "I need $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills, he instructed. 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve. When we land in Seattle, a fuel truck ready to refuel. No funny business." What struck Florence most was his composure. No sweating, no nervous tics, no raised voice. This wasn't a desperate man. This was someone executing a meticulously planned operation. As the plane approached Seattle, Captain William Scott announced a minor mechanical issue to explain the delay to passengers. Meanwhile, Northwest Orient's president had already authorized payment of the ransom. On the ground, FBI agents scrambled to gather the money and parachutes, while Seattle Police Detective Mike Howard counted out 10,000 $20 bills, recording each serial number, a detail that would become crucial in the years to come. FBI Special Agent Ralph Himmelsbach received the call at his Portland office. "Hijacking in progress," the dispatcher said. "Suspect demanding parachutes." "Parachutes?" Himmelsbach repeated, puzzled. In the history of American hijackings, and there had been many in recent years, no one had ever demanded parachutes. Usually, hijackers wanted passage to Cuba or another country. This was different. As darkness fell over Seattle-Tacoma Airport, Cooper remained perfectly calm, even apologizing to passengers for the inconvenience. "You'll be home for Thanksgiving dinner," he assured them. Just a slight delay. Northwest employee Richard Simmons approached the aircraft with a knapsack containing the money and parachutes. The weight of $20 bills felt substantial in his hands. This was no small sum in 1971, equivalent to over $1.3 million today. When the plane landed in Seattle at 5:45 p.m., Cooper allowed all 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants to disembark, keeping only the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, on board. He was methodical, never showing agitation. As the passengers filed out, many had no idea a hijacking was even occurring. "I'd like that money now," Cooper told Tina, who brought the knapsack to him. He examined the cash briefly, then checked each parachute with what appeared to be expert knowledge. Outside the aircraft, FBI agents positioned themselves around the airport, powerless to storm the plane while Cooper held the crew hostage. "I want you to fly to Mexico City," Cooper instructed Captain Scott. Maintain an altitude of 10,000 feet, flaps at 15 degrees, landing gear down, and minimum airspeed. No pursuit aircraft. Captain Scott explained that the plane couldn't reach Mexico without refueling, suggesting Reno, Nevada as an alternative stop. Cooper agreed. As ground crews refueled the aircraft, Tina observed Cooper's hands, steady, with neatly trimmed nails. These weren't the hands of a desperate criminal, but of someone who had practiced this scenario countless times in his mind. At 7:40 p.m., the Boeing 727 took off into the night sky, heading south with Cooper and 4 crew members on board. The FBI's first thought was to have fighter jets follow the aircraft, but Cooper had been explicit. No pursuit, or the bomb would detonate. Instead, they discreetly arranged for an Air Force F-106 to trail the airliner from a distance, flying high enough to avoid detection. Inside the aircraft cabin, Cooper instructed Tina to join the other crew members in the cockpit and stay there with the door closed. "No funny business," he repeated. The interior of the plane was eerily quiet, except for the drone of engines and occasional crackle of radio communications. At approximately 8:13 p.m. over southwestern Washington, a warning light illuminated in the cockpit. The aft stairs had been deployed. The aircraft shuddered slightly. Captain Scott asked over the intercom, "Is everything okay back there?" There was no response. Chapter 2. The morning after Thanksgiving dawned clear and cold over the dense forests of southwestern Washington. FBI agent Ralph Himmelsbach stood at the edge of a clearing near Ariel, Washington, watching as search teams gathered. Overnight, the most extensive manhunt in Pacific Northwest history had been hastily organized. "He could have landed anywhere in this 50-mile stretch," Himmelsbach told the assembled law enforcement officers, pointing to a map marked with the aircraft's flight path. "We're looking for a man in a business suit, possibly injured, carrying a knapsack with $200,000. What they didn't know then was that this search would extend not just across days or weeks, but decades, becoming the longest unsolved air piracy case in American history. 28-year-old Tina Mucklow sat wrapped in a blanket at FBI headquarters in Seattle, recounting her hours with the hijacker. "He was so calm," she repeated. "Nothing seemed to rattle him. He knew aircraft terminology, understood the flight systems. He mentioned something about the pressure bump when we descended to 10,000 feet. Agent Robert Davenport took detailed notes. Did he mention any military experience? Any personal details at all?" Tina shook her head. "Nothing personal. He was polite, but distant. When I asked why he was doing this, he just said, 'I don't have a grudge against your airline, miss. I just have a grudge.'" Meanwhile, Captain Scott was explaining the technical aspects of the hijacking. The aft stairway can be lowered during flight from inside the aircraft. It's designed that way for emergency evacuations on the ground. Cooper must have studied the 727 specifications extensively. The Boeing 727 was one of the few commercial aircraft with an accessible stairway that could be opened in flight, a design feature that would be modified across all airlines in the wake of this incident, creating what became known as the Cooper vein. As the search intensified, theories multiplied. Local sheriff's departments, FBI agents, and military personnel combed the forests, focusing on a drop zone near the small town of Ariel. The terrain was punishing. Dense old-growth forests, steep ravines, fast-flowing rivers, swollen with fall rain. If Cooper had survived the jump, he faced extreme challenges on the ground. Dr. Richard Failing, a skydiving expert consulted by the FBI, was skeptical. Jumping at night, in the rain, in November, at that speed, without a helmet or proper gear, it's nearly suicidal. The temperature at 10,000 feet would have been well below freezing. Add in the 200 mph wind blast from the aircraft, and you're looking at potentially fatal conditions even before reaching the ground. Yet as days passed with no sign of Cooper, dead or alive, a more troubling possibility emerged. What if he had survived? 2 weeks into the investigation, Agent Himmelsbach sat across from Northwest Orient Airlines Flight Operations Manager John Hansen. Tell me about employee records, Himmelsbach asked. Anyone with detailed knowledge of the 727 who left the company recently? Anyone with a grudge? The FBI was pursuing every angle. They interviewed military parachutists, disgruntled airline employees, and known criminals. They created the first ever criminal profile of Cooper, likely military trained, possibly with aviation experience, familiar with the Seattle area, and comfortable with risks but calculated enough to plan meticulously. The physical description from flight attendants was frustratingly generic. White male, 6'0", 170, 180 pounds, mid-40s, olive complexion, dark hair, average features. As one agent put it, he could be anybody's neighbor. 4 months after the hijacking, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was picnicking with his family along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington. While digging in the sand to create a fire pit, he uncovered 3 bundles of deteriorated $20 bills, totaling $5,800. The serial numbers matched the Cooper ransom money. This discovery, rather than solving the case, only deepened the mystery. The money was found 20 miles downstream from where investigators believed Cooper had landed. Had he drowned, with only part of the money washing ashore years later? Or had he planted some bills to mislead investigators? The case captivated the public. Cooper hadn't harmed anyone. He had been courteous throughout the hijacking. In an era of Vietnam protests and growing distrust of authority, many Americans secretly cheered for the mysterious man who had seemingly outsmarted the system. In bars around the Pacific Northwest, particularly at a tavern in Ariel that began hosting annual D.B. Cooper Days, patrons would raise glasses to the audacious criminal who might have pulled off the perfect crime. The FBI, however, was not celebrating. "This isn't a victimless crime," Himmelsbach insisted at a press conference. "He endangered the lives of the flight crew and risked crashing an aircraft into a populated area. He's a criminal, not a folk hero." Chapter 3. By 1976, 5 years after the hijacking, the case file had grown to thousands of pages. Special Agent Ralph Himmelsbach remained obsessed with capturing Cooper, even as other agents moved on to new assignments. His office wall featured a map marked with possible landing zones, potential escape routes, and reported sightings, a spider web of theories that all led nowhere. "You need to let this one go, Ralph," his supervisor suggested during an annual review. "We've got active cases that need attention." Himmelsbach shook his head. "He's out there, and I'm going to find him." The Cooper case had transformed FBI procedures. It led to major changes in commercial aviation security, mandatory screening of all passengers and luggage, the development of the Cooper vane, locking mechanism for 727 airstairs, and new protocols for handling hijacking threats. In many ways, modern airport security was born from this single incident. For Tina Mucklow, the psychological impact lingered. She had left her job as a flight attendant and entered a convent, seeking the peace and isolation that had eluded her since that Thanksgiving Eve. "I don't think of him as evil," she told Himmelsbach during a follow-up interview. "He was like a force of nature, something you can't control or understand, just something you survive." The public's fascination with Cooper grew into a cultural phenomenon. He appeared in songs, books, and films, the gentleman bandit who vanished into thin air. Hundreds claimed to know Cooper's identity. Some even claimed to be Cooper himself. The FBI investigated over 1,000 suspects, ruling out most, but keeping several possibilities open. One compelling suspect emerged in a dying confession. In 1995, Dwayne Weber told his wife on his deathbed, "I'm Dan Cooper." She later recalled him having nightmares about jumping from planes and making an unexplained trip to the Columbia River site where the money was found. When she learned about the D.B. Cooper case after his death, she contacted the FBI. Weber had a criminal record, was the right age and physical description, and had knowledge of the Northwest. For a time, Himmelsbach thought they might have finally solved the case. DNA testing was attempted on a cigarette butt Cooper had left on the plane, but the results were inconclusive. Weber remained a person of interest, but never definitively linked to the crime. Another theory focused on Barbara Dayton, a transgender woman who allegedly confessed to friends that she had committed the hijacking while living as a man. She claimed to have done it to get back at the government for the difficulty she experienced during her gender transition. She knew the Seattle area well and was an experienced pilot and parachutist. Former United Airlines employee Richard McCoy became another prime suspect after committing a similar hijacking just months after Cooper, demanding $500,000 and parachuting from a 727. McCoy was captured, imprisoned, escaped, and was killed in a shootout with law enforcement in 1974. While the FBI ultimately ruled him out based on physical differences, the similarities between the crimes were striking. In 2011, an Oklahoma woman came forward claiming her uncle, Lynn Doyle Cooper, had been injured on Thanksgiving 1971 after hijacking a plane. L.D. Cooper was a Korean War veteran familiar with parachutes and had reportedly shown up at a family gathering with injuries he couldn't explain. The FBI investigated, but found no conclusive evidence linking him to the case. For the investigators who dedicated years to the manhunt, the lack of closure was maddening. It's not just about catching a criminal anymore, Himmelsbach admitted after his retirement. It's about answering the question that's haunted us for decades. What happened to D.B. Cooper? Chapter 4. On July 8, 2016, 45 years after D.B. Cooper vanished into the night sky, the FBI officially suspended active investigation of the case. The announcement came via a brief press release, noting that resources would be better allocated to other matters. The Cooper case would remain open, but no longer actively pursued unless definitive evidence emerged. For many of the original investigators, now retired or deceased, it was a bittersweet moment. The case that had defined their careers would remain unsolved in their lifetimes. Ralph Himmelsbach, now in his 80s, sat on the porch of his Oregon home, looking out at the forests where he once searched for Cooper. "I still think about him," he told a documentary filmmaker who had tracked him down for a final interview. "Not every day anymore, but often enough. I wonder if he's still alive, if he's been watching us chase our tails all these years." The filmmaker asked if Himmelsbach had a theory about what really happened that night. "I've considered every possibility," he replied. "If I had to bet, I'd say he didn't survive the jump. The conditions were too extreme. But then there's the money found along the Columbia and the lack of a body, so I just don't know. That's the thing about Cooper. The not knowing has become more important than the man himself. The mystery had outlived many of its principal characters. Captain William Scott had passed away in 2001, never knowing the identity of the man who hijacked his aircraft. Several of the FBI's key investigators had also died, taking their theories to the grave. Tina Mucklow, now in her 70s, had long refused interviews, but finally agreed to speak at a small gathering of former investigators and aviation security specialists on the 45th anniversary of the hijacking. "People ask if I was afraid of him," she said quietly. "The truth is, I wasn't. There was something almost respectful in how he treated us. He wasn't cruel or threatening beyond what he needed to be to accomplish his goal. In another situation, he might have been just another passenger." The enduring legacy of the case went far beyond one man's fate. The Cooper hijacking fundamentally changed air travel security worldwide. Every time a modern traveler removes their shoes, surrenders their water bottle, or steps through a body scanner, they're experiencing the long shadow of D.B. Cooper's impact on aviation. For criminologists, Cooper represented something rare, possibly the perfect crime. No violence, no capture, no definitive proof of death, and only a fraction of the money ever recovered. He vanished so completely that not even the extensive resources of the FBI could determine his fate with certainty. Over the decades, advanced forensic techniques were applied to the limited physical evidence. In 2017, amateur scientists used modern electron microscopes to examine particles found on Cooper's clip-on tie, which he had left behind on the plane. They discovered numerous industrial materials, including pure titanium, which was rare in 1971. This suggested Cooper might have worked in the aerospace industry, possibly at Boeing or another manufacturer that would have given him detailed knowledge of the 727 aircraft. Still, even this promising lead failed to identify a specific suspect. The Cooper case had become more than a criminal investigation. It was a modern American myth, the story of a man who defied conventional wisdom about what was possible and disappeared into legend. Tom Kay, leader of the independent Cooper research team, summarized the case's unique place in criminal history. Most crimes are puzzles waiting to be solved. The Cooper case is different. It's a mystery. Puzzles have solutions. Mysteries sometimes remain mysteries. For the town of Ariel, Washington, Cooper became an unlikely source of tourism. The annual Cooper Days festival drew curiosity seekers from across the country, all wanting to connect with the legend of the man who might have passed through their forests that rainy November night. "We've had hundreds of people claim to be Cooper, or to know Cooper over the years," said the owner of the Ariel store and tavern. "Could one of them have been telling the truth? Sure. But that's not really the point anymore. Cooper belongs to all of us now." As midnight approached on another Thanksgiving Eve, a commercial airliner passed high over the forests of southwestern Washington. In the first-class cabin, an elderly man gazed out the window at the darkness below. Was he one of the countless travelers who knew the Cooper story and felt a momentary connection to that long-ago night? Or was he someone with more personal knowledge of what really happened when a man in a business suit stepped into the darkness with a fortune strapped to his chest? Like the man himself, the answer remains somewhere in the vast wilderness below, a secret that the night keeps to itself, the final chapter of a story that reality wrote better than fiction ever could.